47 Minecraft item myths tested to see if they work. Starting with, will zombies drop baked potatoes if you kill them with fire? Well, let's find out. It might take a few to kill, it's only a rare drop. And there we go. We see that when it drops a potato, it actually drops as a baked potato. This myth says that you need the proper tool to use enchantments. Well, let's see. I've got a silk touch shovel. Will that let me still get glass? Toggle my glass generator. And sure enough, even though the shovel isn't the right tool for breaking glass, in fact, there's no right tool for breaking glass, it'll always use silk touch regardless of what I break. And in fact, even if we had Silk Touch applied on a block that can't normally have Silk Touch, because, I mean, it's a block, it'll still work even with our Silk Touch dirt. Just don't place it down, then it just becomes dirt. Stone axes are a worse weapon than diamond axes. Well, let's find out. I've got my iron here, my stone, and my diamond, which, if you look at the attack damage, each one of these does 9 attack damage. It's all the same. The only difference is that every increasing axe will do an extra attack speed, meaning that even though the damage is exactly the same, if you want to attack a little bit faster, it does behoove you to craft the next one up. So I'm gonna give this one a kind of. This myth says that wheat crops will drop more wheat if you use fortune tools to harvest them. Even though I'm getting a lot more seeds, it'll actually have no difference on the amount of wheat that I get. And the reason this myth might exist is that if I was breaking down carrots or potatoes, they don't have a seed outside of the item itself, so it's still a good idea to use your fortune tool, but maybe not as good of an idea for this one. This myth says that it's pointless to drink honey when you have full hunger bar. And sure enough, there is actually a point to drinking honey when you have a full hunger bar. And the reason for that is that if I was to get poison, if you wouldn't mind, observer, thank you. If I drink this honey, then it works as something of a milk bucket only for poison, giving me an easy and stackable way to go and save myself from poisoning. And the other reason that you would drink it up is that you could increase your saturation, the secret hunger bar, even if your actual hunger haunches are full. This next myth says that you can only apply honeycomb to copper when it's actually placed as a block in the world, which, as we'll find out, if I took down my copper, sure enough, it does work that way, but it also works if I were to take this stack of block of copper and this stack of honeycomb, put it into my inventory, and I get a full stack of waxed blocks of copper. So it's an easy way to go and patch in a few gaps if you place down blocks before, but otherwise, it's just so much quicker to do it in your crafting inventory. This myth says that crossbows do less damage than bows. Well, let's find out. Now, if I were to take an unenchanted bow against an unenchanted crossbow, then it's worth noting that an unenchanted crossbow shot will always do more damage than a fully charged bow shot. But if we were to enchant both of them up, then our power 5 bow will do more damage than our regular enchanted crossbow. But don't throw away your crossbow just yet, because if you were to fill this up using firework rockets and multi-shot, it could actually go past armor. So depending on the situation, you're going to be either better off using your unenchanted crossbow or your regular enchanted bow. Crossbows can bypass shields. Well, let's find out. Observer, if you wouldn't mind doing the honors. If I stand here with my shield up, sure enough, Observer's able to damage me through the shield without even triggering it to go down, because the piercing enchantment makes it go through the shield. Alright, this myth says that if you have Silk Touch on your shovel, it's going to prevent the gravel from ever dropping flint. And sure enough, no matter how much gravel I break in this gravel generator, it's never going to drop a single piece of flint because of that Silk Touch enchantment. This myth says that we can use bone meal to grow up any kind of plant. Well, let's find out. If I remove these carpet from our sugarcane and our bamboo plants, can I then use bone meal on top of it? Sure enough, I can with the bamboo, but I can't with sugarcane. At least I can't in Java. This only works on Bedrock Edition, where we are able to bone meal up a lot more plants. So I'm going to give this one a kind of, because it really depends on the version that you're playing. This myth says that golden carrots are the highest stat food to eat in the game, which is probably backed up by the fact that you see most players eating this when they're in the late stages of the game. But while a golden carrot restores 6 hunger points and has 14.4 saturation, a rabbit stew is able to fill up 10 hunger points, though it'll be slightly less saturation at only 12 points. I mean that overall, if you just have one food to eat, rabbit stew isn't a bad choice, but it's not stackable, and really the dark secret about rabbit stew is that if you eat all the ingredients that go into a rabbit stew separately, you would just get more hunger that way. This myth says that rotten flesh is the worst food in the game. Let's find out. Well, the way that we're going to decide this is by adding together hunger restored and saturation restored to get what the wiki calls food quality. And if you look at it by that, then you'll see that rotten flesh is actually above all of the raw meats in the game, melon slices, and even slices of cake. And by this metric, the lowest thing in the game would be the pufferfish and the tropical fish, each standing at 1 hunger point restored and 0.2 saturation points. Which the pufferfish is particularly brutal because once you eat it up, all of that poison is basically going to remove any of the benefits you'd get anyway. way. And this also applies hunger, making it by far the worst thing in the game. Logs are a better fuel source than planks. Let's find that out. Because if I were to go and try to smelt up all of these logs using one log versus all of these logs using one plank, then we'll see that both sources are only able to cook up 1.5 items. So obviously the benefit there is that you could just go and craft down your logs into 4 planks, giving you enough fuel source for 6 items. Or you could benefit the most by just taking all of that and cooking it down into charcoal, giving you a way to cook up 8 items with one singular fuel source. This myth says that kelp blocks can smelt 20 items. Well, that would make them one of the best fuel sources in the game, so let's test that out. If I were to cook up this kelp and then take the 9 dried kelp and put it into a dried kelp block, then if I were to go and cook down my kelp this way, we'll see that sure enough, the kelp block does smelt 20, but let's take it in perspective, because to get there, we had to cook up 9 items first, giving us an overall result of 11 smelting power, which is still less than blaze rods at 12, but it's more than other things like coal at 8. So is it better than blaze rods? No. Can it smelt 20 items? I'm gonna give this one a kind of. Resin is only obtainable from encountering the creaking in the Pale Garden, and while that's definitely the most intended way to go and get our resin, it's not the only way, because if we were to go inside of the Woodland Mansion loot, you'll find that it actually does generate inside of our Woodland Mansion chests, meaning that if you were to get enough resin just by going across the different Woodland Mansions, then technically you could make your own Creaking Heart and never have to actually go inside of a Pale Forest, getting you the Pale Oak logs and the Creaking Heart to actually summon in your own creaking and make yourself a resin farm. This one says that you can use the Fortune enchantment to get more books from villager bookshelves. Well, let's find out. If I take my Fortune 3 axe and I go against these villager bookshelves, in fact, it's always going to drop 3 books regardless of any kind of Fortune enchantment, which makes sense. Otherwise, you'd have an infinite loot, considering that you could craft a bookshelf, break it with Fortune for book profit, and then sell it back to different kinds of villagers to get yourself even more bookshelves and creating the cycle anew. This myth says that the Warden drops no loot. Well, it's not a mob that you're supposed to be going around killing, but if I were to go and slay it like so, it does in fact drop a Skulk Catalyst, which we could in fact use to get ourselves more Skulk if we had enough XP dropping on top of it with something like a mob grinder. So it's usable, but it's not exactly the most practical reward. As Mojang originally showed off, snowballs were the way to distract the Warden. So let's see, are snowballs still the best way to distract the Warden? Well, the truth is that any kind of projectile that we use is gonna have the same chance of distracting the Warden, whether it's snowballs, a crossbow with arrows, or even eggs. It all stands the same chance. Even if the loot inside of the ancient cities might lead you to believe otherwise, myth busted. This myth says that using silk-touched brick gold ore in the nether will keep the piglins from getting mad at you. And sure enough, that's not gonna be the case, except for the fact that the piglin might go and get distracted trying to barter with it. It's not actually any less mad at me, it just likes the gold. And the only way to keep yourself safe would be just not mining it next to a piglin regardless. Even if I'm wearing a gold hat, no difference. Just don't steal their stuff. Having a bulk amount of flint is completely useless. Since while you're probably not gonna be going and crafting up a bunch of arrows because you could just trade for them with the Fletcher, the truth is that with that same Fletcher, we could trade down our flint into getting emeralds that allow us to buy more arrows. Meaning that we basically skip the whole step of ever needing a chicken, which I'm sure the chickens appreciate more too. This myth says that we can't enchant items such as the carrot on a stick, shears, or the flint and steel. Because obviously any of these that I put inside of the enchantment table, we're not gonna get anything. But if I were to take something like Unbreaking 3 and go into an anvil here, sure enough, I can attach it even in survival onto things like the carrot of a stick, the shears, or the flint and steel. And all of these can be enchanted with mending too, which gives you the really funny idea of the carrot regrowing on top of the stick. But hey, I guess it's enchanted for a reason, and the reason was to bust that myth. Myth busted! This myth says that sharpness is an exclusive enchantment to our swords. Well, if I go into survival here, we'll see that of course, I can add the sharpness 5 book on my sword, but if I swap in my diamond axe, even though I can't get it through the enchantment table, I can still get it with an enchanted book like so. And the benefit of all this is that if we were to take a netherite axe and then add sharpness 5 on top of it, that'll take its damage all the way up to 18 damage with an axe crit. This myth says that wind charges are the same as a breeze's projectile. Well, if we have a breeze here, will it trigger redstone the same way that a wind charge would? Well, it's able to flip down our certain trapdoors and gates, but as a matter of fact, our wind charge projectiles that we throw out have an added 10% knockback. This myth says that the mace can do as much damage as a falling anvil. Well, let's see if I climb up the scaffolding here. Then down there we have our dummy. That's a husk with 50 health. And if I were to drop in an anvil like so, which as you can very clearly see, regardless of how much damage that anvil did, I did a lot more with my mace. And one of the big reasons for that is that our anvils can actually cap out at damage, doing a max of 40 HP. And one of the big reasons for that is that the mace is able to scale its damage infinitely. So after the first 3 blocks that we fall, our mace is going to do 2 hearts of damage. Then the next 5 blocks that we fall are going to scale it up another heart. And then every extra block that we fall after that is going to give it an extra half a heart damage. Meaning that once we've fallen this far, we're doing a whole bunch of damage even without having enchanted our mace, whereas the anvil only caps out at 40 HP. This myth says that we're able to get the advancement for planting down any kind of seed as opposed to just our regular seeds for getting the farming advancement. Which if I place down my carrots, potatoes, I don't get the advancement, but placing down a kind of seed, whether that's torchflower seeds, wheat seeds, or pitcher pods, those will all work for a seedy place. Which is a bit confusing because the pitcher pod doesn't even have seeds in the name, so I don't know why it wouldn't apply for the rest of our options. But anyway, myth busted. This myth says that chainmail armor is fully unobtainable, which we'll soon find out just isn't the case. There's a chance that we could trade with armor villagers to get chainmail. We can go and find it inside of loot chests like so, inside of woodland mansions, or through combat armor drops that we're seeing with mob spawners. This myth says that if I was to have a piercing and flame enchanted crossbow, then if I shoot it through this TNT here, it'll ignite all of them, which as you can unfortunately see, it'll collide with a block before it would go through any of them as entities. As cool as this would be, it is impossible. Now, when you see something called flight duration 3, you're probably expecting it to have 3 times the flight duration of a flight duration 1. Well, let's test that. If I take this and then try my flight duration 1, you'll see that a flight duration 1 rocket gives you a flight duration of 1.17 seconds, and a flight duration 2 gives us 1.48 seconds, and a flight duration 3 gives us the overall of 2.22 seconds. So even though you're using 3 times the amount of gunpowder to get this, it's closer to about 2 times the flight effectiveness. So unless you have a surplus of gunpowder, it's probably just better off just crafting more of the flight duration 1s if you can. This myth says that if you were to wear Frostwalker 2 boots, then you'll keep yourself safe from any kind of magma blocks or campfire damage. Which, as we can see, if I go and step on top of this campfire, I can put on my Frostwalker boots and I'm completely fine. I'm not even sneaking and I'm completely fine on the magma blocks too. This myth says that we can store potions inside of a cauldron like we can on Bedrock. And unfortunately, it's not possible. The only way that we're storing potions inside of cauldrons is just by throwing the item inside of the block. And it's unfortunate that we don't have parity for this way. So this myth says that plants are the best item to compost in the composter. I mean, it would make sense, it is the composter. But the truth is that the best chance you have of raising the compost level is by using something like pumpkin pie or cake, because that always has a 100% chance of increasing the compost level. Even then though, it still takes so much pumpkin pie just to get 1 bone meal. I mean that even if you know the best way to use the composter, it's still not always a very practical block. This myth says that apples will only drop from oak trees, which if I go and break these leaves, we'll eventually see that it's not just our regular oak trees that can give us apples, but in fact, they're able to drop from dark oak leaves as well, as we see right there. But just when you think that it would be all kinds of oak trees that would drop this, the truth is that even if I plant down a pale oak sapling, they will never actually drop any kind of apples. So it's false either way. Myth busted. This myth says that we can brush a baby turtle to get skew, which unfortunately, no matter how much I'm right-clicking, we actually never get any skew from our baby turtles. It's only something that's for armadillos. And the only way to get skewed is if our baby turtle grows up and drops it once it becomes an adult. This myth says that you can't uncraft quartz blocks back into quartz, which if I take my nether quartz like so, I can craft it up into a block of quartz, but I can't get it back. And the whole reason this happens this way is because otherwise you'd be able to buy quartz blocks from the stonemasons and then get the full item that way. Which means that we could completely bypass the nether if we were able to do it this way to get other things like observers and comparators, which unfortunately Mojang doesn't want, which is why this myth's confirmed. This myth says that we can use a splash water bottle to extinguish our campfires. That's completely true. This myth says that a villager will drop its held items on death. Well, let's see, we've got a villager there with armor equipped on it through this dispenser, and even though we can't see it, it will take longer to kill the villager with that netherite chest plate. And sure enough, it does drop that netherite chest plate. But if I was to take a villager here and give it a whole bunch of foodstuffs to go into its secret inventory, then even though it's able to give it to another villager through trading, if I kill off this villager, it won't drop any of the bread that I gave it. So this one's gonna get a partial confirm. It works for armor, doesn't work for any kind of other items. This myth says that the only reason why maps don't work in the nether is because of the bedrock ceiling, which let's find out. If I were to take a map and fly up to the ceiling, can I then create a new map up here and see? Well, sure enough, even if I were to place down a whole bunch of this black stone here, we're never actually going to see it on the map because it's fully intentional that our maps will never work in the nether, very similar to how compasses don't work without a lodestone. So this observer face doesn't work, and that's how I feel about it. Nether stars are completely immune to fire and lava, just like netherite. Well, if I take my nether star and I throw it in there, unfortunately, I'm not getting it back. Because while nether stars are blast resistant, they're not resistant to everything else the same way that they would be in Bedrock Edition. This myth says that lapis is a non-renewable resource, which, as we'll find out, when I get the hero of the village and I go and interact with the cleric villagers, then occasionally they are able to throw out lapis lazuli as an item. So while it is hard to get, it's not impossible to get a renewable source of lapis. There we go. And now I've got myself my lapis. It's only 2 pieces, but it is renewable. This myth says that we can use harnesses to lead our happy ghasts. So we've got our happy ghast, it starts flying away, but if I were to hold down a harness, it will actually come to me, which is pretty useful. You don't have to wrangle them in to be able to ride them. This myth says that banner patterns are consumed on use the same way that armor trims are. Well, let's see. If I take my banner here, take my field masoned banner pattern, and I apply it like so, I still have my banner pattern even after dyeing my banner, which is good considering that the thing banner pattern takes a whole enchanted golden apple to be able to use it. This myth says that using bone blocks on wolves will instantly tame them. Well, unfortunately, as cool as that would be, it doesn't work. You can't use any kind of bone blocks onto our wolves, and it's just the regular bones that do the trick. And similarly for our wolves, this myth says that any food item will heal up our wolves the exact same way. Well, let's see. If I tame up my wolf like so, then if I were to feed it things like puffer fish and tropical fish, that'll only heal up 2 HP for our wolf. And luckily, it doesn't give it the poison effect, but the highest amount of HP that we can restore for our wolves is by using rabbit stew to give it 20 full HP. This myth says that copper ingots can heal up our copper golems the same way that iron ingots can heal up our iron golems. Well, let's see. If I were to harm this copper golem and then right click it with copper ingots, it has no interaction on the copper golem. So the only way to increase its health would be using something like an instant healing potion. This myth says that if a mob is holding the Totem of Undying, it's able to use it. Well, we can definitely see that the husk is holding it, and if I kill it off, it uses that Totem of Undying. But what about the blaze? Well, sure enough, even if you can't see the mob actually holding onto it, it will still use the Totem of Undying. This myth says that diamonds are completely unrenewable. Well, the truth is that thanks to our vaults that we see down in the trial chambers, they only have a memory of 128 players, meaning that if you had 128 friends, then when you go up to it on the 129th time, it is possible to get even more diamonds from the same trial vault. So that's the way that we get the raw diamonds, and then if we want just the diamond tools and armor, we can trade for those with villagers. This myth says that Eyes of Ender will always lead you directly to the end portal. Well, let's see. Take my Eye of Ender and I throw it. It'll in fact always lead me to the stronghold, but not directly to the end portal, because they're only programmed to take you to this staircase, giving you the entrance room of the stronghold. And even if we go underneath and start throwing them, they're gonna want to lead us up to that room. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one. All right.